Back to world affairs and the business of this week, which, of course, is Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Now, obviously, there is one man directly responsible for the outrages we are seeing out of Eastern Europe these past few days. That man, of course, is Vladimir Putin. But let's be honest. He would not be so emboldened to do what he is doing were it not for the actions or inactions of another man. I am talking, of course, about Joe Biden, a person who came to power in no small part due to the Democrat lie that Donald Trump was somehow in the pocket of Moscow, and not 13 months later is sitting in the White House, impotently contemplating what to do next as Russian soldiers storm Kiev and images of the horror are beamed around the world. Now, it is helpful here to remember that back in 2020, Joe Biden said that, quote, Vladimir Putin doesn't want me to be president. He doesn't want me to be our nominee. And if you're wondering why, he said, it's because I'm the only person in this field who's ever gone toe-to-toe with him. Really? Now, this would appear to refer to a meeting that Joe Biden had all the way back in 2011 when he was Barack Obama's vice president that took place between him and Putin back in Moscow. I mean, toe-to-toe? I'm not really sure about that. There's probably about as much truth in that as there are in his claims that he finished top of his class at law school or was the son of generations of coal miners. Because remember, it was under the Obama administration that Putin took the Crimean Peninsula and suffered very little in the way of consequence from that wet noodle administration. Now, after 4 years of temporary peace brought about by the Trump administration, we have another feckless Democrat in the White House, and things are even worse. Recall that in the days leading up to the invasion, what was the genius strategy of the Biden administration to prevent this occurring? Tell the world that their super-duper secret intelligence told them that Russia was planning to invade Ukraine. Hello? The CIA has an annual budget of $15 billion a year that we know about, and this is the genius stuff they come up with? A certain phrase involving old mate Sherlock comes to mind. And seriously, why wouldn't Vladimir Putin think Joe Biden and the American administration something of a joke? I mean, look at the public face of this White House. We've had the humiliating pullout from Afghanistan, presided over by a chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who still has his job, by the way, where he is free to go to Congress and testify about why it is important to study critical race theory and white rage. Seriously. While the U.S. Army has been touting its diversity, with ads celebrating female soldiers who grew up with same-sex parents because, hey, inclusion is our strength or something like that, the Russian army has been recruiting soldiers with the phrase, pain makes you stronger, emphasizing that their military is not a human resources department, but rather a cold-blooded killing machine. While the White House was using, well, the White House as a backdrop for goofy Gen Z influencer routines and recruiting a guy who is prominent in the puppy play kink community, don't even ask what that is, to deal with the country's nuclear waste, Vladimir Putin was building up troops on the Ukrainian border and watching as the West gave him ever more ammunition for his belief that we are decadent, depraved, weak, and absolutely deserving of a global humiliation. Throughout this crisis, and indeed this entire administration, there has been a mid-wit level inability among the foreign policy elite to get the fact that the world is a dangerous place, and state actors and totalitarian leaders do not always follow norms of polite behavior, and indeed, they are watching every move the Biden administration makes. It's a sort of end of history thinking that has afflicted us in one way or another since the end of the Cold War, when it was assumed that the whole world would become progressive liberal democracies. Well, sorry, not everyone is buying what we are selling in that department, and indeed some think that the think tank idiocracy could never figure out is that many traditional societies look at what Western liberalism now entails and recoil in horror. Today it's our turn. We've bought the ticket, now we've got to take the ride. Well, there's so much to get through here, but I mean, the most important, I think most interesting thing here, Rowan and Rita, is that it does appear that Ukraine is putting up much more of a fight than anybody anticipated that they would. There's a number of reasons for this. Number one, it appears that the Russian army just simply went in with total hubris and did not go about the business of destroying Ukraine's air superiority over the Ukrainian territory first and foremost before moving in troops. Now, the Russians are fighting, according to a very strict timeline. That timeline appears to be getting thrown out of whack by Ukrainian resistance, which is all great news. So it means that Putin is going to wind up, I think, being bogged down here for quite some time unless he figures out some sort of way to pull back, come to some sort of resolution with Ukraine, and essentially sue for peace. I think the president of Ukraine has been an absolute hero in all of this, basically saying that he is going to stay and fight from Kiev rather than, shall we say, the president of Afghanistan, who fled on a plane full of money when he left Afghanistan when the U.S. so shamefully abandoned Afghanistan last year under the Biden administration. So I think there's a lesson for everybody there. And that's really helping, I think, the world rally around the cause of Ukraine, because, whatever the very complicated geopolitics, and they are very much more complicated than I think people are giving them credit for, the Russian behavior here is absolutely outrageous, and it simply cannot be allowed to stand. And it's also, I think, important to say that while it is great to see protests happening in Russia, it's great to see that tennis player out there writing "No war, please" on the camera, although that does have a bit of that sort of celebrity singing Imagine kind of feel to it. There is also an awful lot of support within the Russian community for what Putin is doing in here, and we shouldn't have any illusions about this, that somehow Putin is despised universally within Russia, just as he seems to be despised universally around so much of the rest of the world. I mean, there was an article today in one of the Sydney papers where they went out to one of the Russian communities, and they found that probably about half and half within the Russian community within Australia, people are divided on whether or not Putin is doing the right thing. So we also should be careful. And Rita, your point is very well taken. All of these clips we're seeing, we don't know what we're seeing. None of us speak Ukrainian, or most of us don't speak Ukrainian. We don't know what is happening with a lot of these things. We can't verify them easily, so we should be careful. But let's also, let's not romanticize things, because we do know that within Russia, Joseph Stalin is still considered a hero by an awful lot of people. So we do need to be pretty clear-eyed about what we're dealing with here. And the revoking of the Emergencies Act is incredibly cynical. This was a test run for liberal fascism of the worst kind. We saw it with the seizing of bank accounts, the seizing of pets, the threats to take children away, the stealing of money that was donated to the cause, the basically bullying of anybody who did give money to the cause, the leaking of who gave money so that their businesses and their employers could be harassed, and right on down the line. And, most people failed the test on this, and most people in the media, in the Canadian and American and really the global media, failed the test.
I think it's a right for people to have bad health care.
A good point, but at least it's good to know the President of the United States' moral authority and spiritual guidance rests with, the thing.
We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by go. You know the thing.
I just want to probe a little further on the mood in the House about the Ukrainian situation. Now, we've also seen, and the Farage speech sounds absolutely fantastic, but we've also seen big conservative figures like Tucker Carlson come out and say, this isn't our fight, and if we're in this fight, actually, Russia is more sympathetic than potentially Ukraine. Is there a danger that this somehow splits the conservatives into sort of an isolationist wing and an interventionist wing that actually, scarily enough, could play into the hands of Joe Biden and the Democrats? And when Mike Pompeo spoke, did he address this issue? Because I think that he is one of the smartest voices on foreign policy that we've got out there, but I'd be curious to hear what he had to say about all this.
Well, Mike Pompeo, no one's saying that there's boots on the ground, but they're all universally expressing admiration for the Ukrainian people, and in particular, the President Zelensky. There's no doubt that there's admiration for what the Ukrainian people are doing. I think it's hardening the resolve of the Republican Party as we speak, day by day. It's hardening the resolve that they must support the Ukrainian people, but no one is saying boots on the ground. Pompeo is warning of the dangers of allowing Putin to easily take Ukraine and then start probing those other ex-Soviet nations that I mentioned before. There's no doubt that he's one of the smartest men in the room. I've spoken to Pompeo about coming to Australia and we're hopefully getting him down. He talks about how Xi Jinping is watching, how Taiwan is definitely on the radar, how if the world doesn't step forward and take strong action against Putin, Xi Jinping will most likely, walk into Taiwan. And if America can't come to terms with dealing with Putin in Ukraine, how are they going to come to terms with Putin in Ukraine and China in Taiwan? I mean, it's a scary thought. I had some personal discussions with KT McFarlane, who was the ex-deputy national security advisor to Donald Trump one night, and she's quite concerned that if things go wrong, this could very easily spiral out of control and be World War III at some point in the not too distant future.